Okay, we'll start with this. I'm sure that most of you have heard by now, a new deal has been signed between Caroline Dubois and the people over there at Boxer and Sky Sports. One of the hardest hitting and most exciting prospects in the world of boxing. We are delighted to have re-signed a long-term, emphasis on long-term, promotional agreement with Caroline Dubois, a star in the making and the beginning of a new era.
My thoughts.
So we had been hearing about a potential Caroline Dubois versus Moneo fight for WBC interim status for weeks and months now, but it seemed like progress was moving slow.
It's taking too long to make.
This re-signing may have been why. Negotiating new terms for an extended deal, an extended stay at Sky Sports and Boxer before making the fight official. I guess they wanted a commitment from Caroline, and they got it, but it comes at a cost. You see, Caroline Dubois is the one who's been calling out Rhiannon Dixon, newly crowned WBO champion, who's over there at Matchroom.
If you stay with Sky and Boxer, you put distance between yourself, Rhiannon Dixon, Terry Harper.
No, I don't doubt that Caroline Dubois would have liked to fight Rhiannon Dixon. I don't doubt that she wanted that fight. But crossing over from Boxer over to Matchroom would have brought her dangerously close to Beatriz Ferreira, this division's IBF champion. She's with Matchroom too.
She said she wants to fight Caroline.
Currently, Beatriz Ferreira has so qualified for the next Olympic Games, and she's going to be preoccupied with that for the time being. When she comes back, she is this division's reigning IBF champion. And if Caroline would have went to Matchroom in pursuit of a Dixon fight, it would have brought her dangerously close to that fight. And she doesn't want that fight. Not right now. We've talked about that in several videos. So she has so decided to stay on the Boxer and Sky Sports side of things, where she can be the A-side to everybody they get her.
Like Mayra Moneo.
She can be the house fighter, and everybody else is just the away fighter. This fight with Mayra is supposed to be for both WBC interim and the IBO lightweight title. The real value is that WBC interim title, because if you get that, you get your hands on that, you're in line to become this division's full WBC champion.
Who's the full WBC champion?
Katie Taylor. She is still in possession of both WBC and WBA lightweight titles, even though currently she's undisputed at super lightweight. She's about to fight Amanda Serrano for the second time later on this year. What Caroline Dubois and the people at Boxer are doing is playing the waiting game. They're waiting for Katie Taylor to drop the titles she still holds at 135 because she's undisputed at 140. That's what they're doing.
They're waiting.
Going to take care of business against Uruguay's Mayra Moneo in the in-between time. Mayra Moneo is best described as a mid-range to inside scrapper, volume puncher.
She's experienced. She's been around.
A winnable fight for Caroline Dubois that will test her mettle, because usually Caroline is the aggressor. Caroline is the aggressive puncher. Well, Mayra's aggressive too, though without the nuances and Olympic pedigree that Caroline Dubois has. This fight will give Caroline the opportunity to put her boxing on display as opposed to her brawn,
her brute force, her knockout power, her physical attributes. This fight will allow her to put her boxing on display.
Because Mayra's going to come right at her. Mayra is not the kind of opponent you have to chase, you have to go out there and find. She'll find you. Thus, it's on Caroline Dubois to maintain distance, keep enough space between her and Mayra that she can get the punches out and get them off.
Beat those feet.
If she doesn't and she's too stationary, Mayra's going to be all over her, and Mayra has a propensity for overshooting the distance when getting punches out.
She's scrappy.
She's a combination puncher, she is, but she's messy. And if you don't move and create some space, she's all over you.
She's going to be all over you.
Prevent that from happening, you have to move. You have to manage the distance to get your punches out and land with authority. It'll be interesting to see how Caroline Dubois fares against an aggressive opponent like herself, somebody who wants to trade punches on the inside.
She's the logical choice to win. Caroline Dubois is my pick.
The question is, can she stay in character? It's not just about winning, but how you look up until you do. Does she stop Mayra Moneo? I'd be impressed if she does. Mayra's never been stopped.
She's never been knocked out.
And if she doesn't knock her out, if she doesn't land with the same authority on Mayra that she's landed on other girls, does she struggle? Does she start to look human? It's a good acid test for Caroline.
It's a good fight.
Set to go down early next month on the 3rd. Available here in America on Peacock, NBC's streaming app.
Should be a good fight.
Looking forward to it. Now we know. Caroline's going to stay on the Sky Sports and Boxer side of things for the foreseeable future, which really comes as no surprise. In men's super middleweight news, the path has been cleared for Saul Canelo Alvarez's favored September pay-per-view date. As the deadline approaches for Saul Canelo Alvarez to announce his next fight, one pressing detail was clarified this past Monday. If the Mexican wants to return to fight on Mexican Independence Day weekend, he won't be in pay-per-view competition with Conor McGregor. The UFC's president, Dana White, told Boxing Scene on Monday that the popular former two-division champion McGregor will not be placed on the UFC's debut card at Las Vegas' Sphere on September 14th.
I see this becoming more and more of a conversation. Boxing cards going head-to-head with UFC cards.
And whether or not one card would cannibalize the audience for the other. I often maintain that implies that they're sharing an audience, which they're not. Canelo Alvarez's supporters, the ones that show up to his fights and buy his pay-per-views, that's a different demographic than the people who might want to see a Conor McGregor
or a UFC card.
Those are different audiences. Now, there are some hybrid fans who watch both boxing and mixed martial arts, the UFC. There are some hybrids, but it's often overstated, like it was in this article. While boxing and UFC fans often remain loyal to their respective fighting disciplines, the potential for combat and mainstream sports fans to have their investment divided was raised while both McGregor and Alvarez plotted their next fight dates. In a nod to maximize pay-per-view buys, Alvarez previously allowed a 2019 UFC main event to finish before he took to the ring that night and stopped then light heavyweight champion Sergey Kovalev. McGregor bowed out of his planned June 29th UFC main event with a broken toe, and there was speculation that he could further boost the intrigue over the Sphere card by returning there for his first fight since 2021. McGregor's return date remains unfinalized.
And this is what I mean.
The demographic that might want to see Conor McGregor return to the octagon is not the same demographic that regularly takes in a Canelo Alvarez fight. Those are two separate audiences, two different audiences, and one has nothing to do with the other. So you could probably do both those shows on the same date.
And they're gonna do whatever they're gonna do because they cater to different demos.
Dana White has touted the Sphere event as one of the most appealing his organization has ever staged at the cinematic venue that has already hosted a U2 residency. Incidentally, another by the Eagles is coming in September. He also said that he expects to announce the UFC's September 14th main event soon.
I'm surprised that Conor McGregor's still around. The guy hasn't fought in something like 2.5 going on 3 years.
But they're still relying on Conor McGregor to put asses in the seats? I mean, I don't know. Maybe he can. Maybe he does still move the needle. I couldn't tell you because I don't watch that stuff. And that goes back to what I said before. MMA and boxing don't share a very big audience. You have a few hybrid fans here and there that watch them both. But generally speaking, Conor McGregor and Canelo Alvarez don't share the same demo. So one can't cannibalize the other. A boxing official connected to talks with Alvarez said that the undisputed super middleweight champion has discussed 3 dates, September 7th, September 14th, and early October, and is most likely going to bring his next fight to Vegas. By going in September, Alvarez increases his chances of making a third fight this year amid rumors in boxing circles that he could bring a showdown against Terrence Crawford to the SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, California, late in the fourth quarter of this year.
That card, according to a boxing industry official, would be influenced by Saudi Arabia's Turkey Al-Sheikh, whose Riyadh season is also sponsoring the August 3rd card in LA at the downtown LAFC soccer stadium.
An individual close to Terrence Crawford told Boxing Scene on Monday that the unbeaten 3-division champion understands that his August 3rd win of a world title in a 4th division against WBA junior middleweight champion Israel Madrimov is also a live audition to prove himself worthy of a shot at Canelo Alvarez, who turns 34 this Thursday. The individual said that he sees Alvarez as a more likely next opponent for Crawford than Jaron Boots Ennis, and added that the expectation is that Alvarez is basing his decision on Crawford on how the August 3rd main event plays out.
Crawford's got to look good,
capable, and worthy of a Canelo Alvarez fight. So it's not just enough to win, to scrape a win. He's got to do it in good fashion. If you want people to believe that you can handle yourself at 168, you need to handle yourself at 154 first.
In good fashion.
I'm sure Alvarez will be watching, the individual said. Alvarez's manager and trainer Eddie Reynoso told Boxing Scene before Alvarez's victory on Cinco de Mayo weekend over Jaime Munguia that he expects to work again for his next fight with Al Heyman's PBC and Amazon Prime Video pay-per-view. The believed frontrunner for Alvarez is his World Boxing Association mandatory challenger Edgar Berlanga, an unbeaten power puncher from Brooklyn, New York, providing the necessary Puerto Rican ancestry to revive the Mexico versus Puerto Rico rivalry and to bring a style ripe for an all-action shootout and a likely knockout.
So doesn't that make this a keep busy fight?
In a manner of speaking, yes. If the end game is a Terence Crawford showdown at the end of the year, that makes whatever Canelo Alvarez is doing in September a stay busy fight, a maintenance fight.
Whether it's a stay busy fight with Edgar Berlanga or Chris Eubank Jr., who's also said to be in the running.
Alvarez is believed to have struck an agreement to postpone his more pressing mandatory challenger against the IBF's number one contender, William Skull of Cuba. British middleweight Chris Eubank Jr. has also been in discussions for the next Alvarez fight.
No mention of David Benavidez? They didn't bring him up?
If Canelo ends up fighting either Edgar Berlanga or Chris Eubank Jr. in September, even if it's just as a stay busy fight en route to a Crawford fight, people are gonna be unhappy. They are. They're gonna be critical because Canelo's a pay-per-view fighter.
A box office fight, it costs you anywhere in between $70 and $80 to watch this guy fight. But do you want to watch him fight Edgar Berlanga? Do you want to watch him fight Chris Eubank Jr.?
As it pertains to Chris Eubank Jr., who recently inked a pact with Ben Shalom and the people over there at Sky Sports and Boxer, Chris Eubank Jr. must decide if facing Canelo Alvarez in Vegas makes financial sense.
Why wouldn't it make financial sense?
The promoter of Chris Eubank Jr. believes the chances of Saul Canelo Alvarez taking on his charge in September are about 50-50 at the moment. Ben Shalom, who recently added Eubank Jr. to his burgeoning stable at Boxer, said that negotiations with the Mexican superstar are ongoing, with Las Vegas the likeliest city to play host. Eubank Jr.'s name was a surprise addition to the Canelo sweepstakes. Edgar Berlanga was presumed to be the opponent who would face the world super middleweight champion in September. The Briton, a perennial middleweight contender, has not competed at 168 since February of 2019, but remains one of the most marketable fighters in Europe and has long courted the idea of taking on Alvarez.
Guy hasn't fought as a super middleweight in 5 years?
I think he knows it's now or never to fight a lot of the names that have been talked about throughout his career, Shalom told Boxing Scene. He also wants world titles. It's good to get someone at the stage of their career with their name built, ready for the big fights. He's a realist, and he knows that the next 18 months to 2 years are where all his big fights need to happen. It is understood that the ball is in Eubank's court. As usual, it comes down to money, Shalom explained regarding the Canelo negotiations. Chris has a certain expectation for a fight like that. He's earned a huge amount during his career, and he's got other big fights being offered to him, but it's definitely a fight that he wants. Negotiations are ongoing, but it all comes down to whether it makes financial sense for him.
Well, suck my tets and call me Sally. Did he just refer to Chris as a realist?
That's funny. When contextualized with the earning power of Canelo, it can be difficult to attain what Chris wants. Since Alvarez unofficially became the biggest star in boxing following Floyd Mayweather's retirement in 2017, he's dominated at the negotiation table. I think anyone that fights Canelo knows that, whether it's David Benavidez or anyone else that's been talked about, Shalom said. But I think for Chris, he's just such a big name in the UK. Every time he fights, he generates interest and money. As a promoter, all you can do sometimes is get the deal on the table and present it. Ultimately, it comes down to the fighter and whether financially it works for him. I'd say 50-50, Shalom said, on the probability of the fight happening. Like I say, he has a lot of options, and if I'm honest, it's not down to the Canelo side, it's more Chris, and rightfully so. There's a certain amount he's used to earning, and he wants to get what he deserves from a fight against someone like Canelo. If an agreement is reached, it's understood that the bout would take place in Vegas and not the UK. An important detail, as has been rumored. We have talked about staging the fight in the UK, Shalom revealed. The difficulty we've had with that one is that with the AJ versus Dubois card on September 21st, it's hard to envision another stadium card a week either side of that. That's been the main barrier. I think Canelo knows that if he's to box in the UK, which he is attracted to and has been for the sake of his legacy, then Eubank is the only opponent who could generate the sort of numbers he wants.
Yeah, if it were going to be in the UK, but it's not. They're saying it's going to be in Vegas.
Chris Eubank Jr.'s drawing power really is exclusive to the United Kingdom, not the United States. So if this is a fight that's set to go down in the United States, Chris Eubank Jr.'s demands may not be realistic and indicative of the market that he's fighting in, because this ain't the UK.
Enter Edgar Berlanga.
Chris Eubank Jr. is coming up on his mid-30s, and he's been making good money, very good money, domestic money in the United Kingdom, but he ain't making mega money.
Ben says that he has other fights on the table. What are the fights of those? Because if you pass on Canelo...
And you know what else Ben said? Ben said there are no discussions around a Conor-Ben fight. Now, between Canelo and Conor-Ben, those are two of the biggest fights that Chris could hope to have. Either Conor-Ben in the UK or Canelo Alvarez here. If you walk away from both and you don't fight them, what other big fights are out there?
Hamza Shiraz?
Oh yeah, Hamza, that would be a decent-sized fight. A decent-sized fight. But no, not on the scale of Conor-Ben, and no, not on the scale of Canelo. Is that who Ben is talking about? Or Yanni Bekalam Kanalai?
Big fights, he says. Big fights, my pimpled ass. Big ego is more like it.
If things fall apart between Canelo Alvarez and Chris Eubank Jr., I ain't gonna lose sleep over it, because it won't be the first time that Chris negotiated his ass out of a big fight. He did that with Golovkin. He could do it now with Canelo.
Don't forget he did it with Conor-Ben a few months ago.
It's his loss. If he lost the opportunity to fight the likes of Canelo Alvarez in Vegas...
On to the next one.